Okay, I think I've got everybody that was waiting, so I'll keep an eye on that to let people in as we go. Hope you guys had a good week. I don't have a handout today with all of the questions that I have kind of got from you guys over the last couple weeks, but specifically in response to last week's. I think that we're just going to spend our time today kind of focusing on how to do internal work and how to communicate with parts, because that's just a lot of the questions kind of go around that. And so what I'll do is after we're done today, I will do a handout based on what we talked about. And that way we can make it just really applicable to everybody who's on here. Got a few more people hopping in. All right, I'm going to take a couple minutes and pray for us, and then we'll get started. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for this time and for just this opportunity for all of us to meet together and to talk about your design of trauma coping systems and your design for healing. I ask, Father, that as we talk, that we would all learn and grow, that every single person that is engaged in either this live Zoom or in the recording, that you would be with them and present, Father, that you would silence every voice that's not of you, that you prohibit any counterfeit, deception, lie, or trick of the enemy from engaging, and that you would bring truth, that you would bring life, and that you would just continue the healing for each and every person. I thank you, Father, and I just give you full authority here in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. So, like I mentioned, a lot of the questions that have come through have been about internal communication. And so I'm going to kind of roughly go over this. And I just realized I left my card in the other room with all of my words on it. Uh, we'll leave it. I don't want to take the time to grab it. I might pop it up in the video right here somewhere so you can see it when you watch the recording later. The internal communication is undoubtedly one of the hardest things when you are going through a healing journey of trauma coping system, DID, especially if there's SRA. But it is important. It is the pathway to healing. When you think about how a trauma coping system or dissociation developed, it developed because there were these conflicting things happening for a child that didn't make sense. My parent is supposed to be safe, but my parent hurts me. I have this innate sense that I have value and worth, but I'm treated like an object. I have these feelings and these thoughts going on inside of me, but people are telling me I shouldn't be expressing pain, especially in abuse situations. Just kind of that submit mentality. That's conflicting for an adult. That would be conflicting to try to navigate that. If you've ever had a job that had maybe a passive aggressive boss, or maybe you have a family member that is demanding but doesn't understand why you're not just happy to be with them, like those type of conflicting situations, even as an adult, we have a hard time navigating them. But as a child, the brain is not even fully developed until we're in our early 20s. And so there's just not a way to navigate these type of conflicts. And so dissociation develops because we have to keep them separate. Part of God's design, he knew he developed our brain to not be fully developed till we were in our 20s. And he knew that trauma would happen, not to every child, but trauma would happen. And I'm talking about, because every child has bad things that happens to them. Okay. No perfect parents, no perfect childhood for sure. But I'm talking the type of trauma that creates these conflicts that can't be resolved. And so what happens is they separate internally, and you have the side of the conflict that is my parent is my caregiver. I can only survive because of my parent, and my parent hurts me. I can't navigate it, so it has to separate inside. And if it's repaired, then it can come back together and doesn't develop into two self states. But if it's not repaired, then eventually a wall goes up between. And that's where you get kind of these two separate belief systems and two separate mindsets. The world is safe, the world is not safe. And it's not it's not this mix of, oh yes, there's some safe things and some unsafe things. What can we do? But it's all or nothing. The world is 100% safe. The world is 100% unsafe. That's how defined these dissociative mindsets can be. When we talk about repair as a child, especially if it's not the caregiver that is the abuser, or if it is the caregiver and then they're removed from the home, there's repair that can happen with other adults that can help them navigate that internal conflict and make sense of it. So an example of that would be, let's say you have a healthy family, there's not abuse in the home, and let's say the favorite grandmother dies. And so then the child is maybe your child is 6, 7 years old. So then you have this internal conflict of, oh my gosh, like my grandmother, I thought she would be here forever. Like kids don't have a concept of death, right? Especially at that age. So then you have this, well, she's just gone. Like, when can we see her? Are we going to visit heaven? Like, when is she coming back? All of those questions. And then you have the reality that she's not. So if I've worked with people that were dissociated from that, but it was because their parents didn't do any reparatives. And so in homes, it's not uncommon in the work that I do to see families that were told, okay, grandma's gone, so we're just never going to talk about her again. Like this is just an off limits topic. Or yes, but she's in a better place now, so be happy, don't be sad. And so all the emotions are squashed. So when that happens, there's no repair. The child can't make sense of these two realities. And so that's how dissociation can happen. But if you allow a child to process it in the way that they can, then often that repair happens naturally and that dissociation doesn't stick. So that's what I mean by repair attempts. Comfort is a good repair attempt. Just kind of letting somebody cry is really good repair attempt. Depending on the amount of disconnect internally, um, however intense or frequent the trauma was, the repair attempt has to be equally intense or frequent in order for dissociation not to happen. But for many of you here, and for a lot of the people, those of you that are caregivers that you work with, they did not have those repair attempts, or they often the abuse wasn't even known and by the adults that were around them. And so then what happens is those self states stay separate. Those beliefs stay separate and they develop into entire mindsets. And both mindsets are necessary to grow up. So if we just take this really basic one of the world is safe, the world is not safe. When we're living in this mindset, we're able to to do things. We're able to go to work. We're able to have a family. We're able to go to church. We're able to have friends and socialize. But when our mind shifts to this mindset, all of that is scary. It produces anxiety. It might produce depression. Definitely a sense of isolation comes with the belief that the world is unsafe because there's nothing that you can do. There's no one you can trust, and there's no safe places. That's a pretty scary mindset to live in. As a kid, that's necessary when you're in trauma because, and maybe not everyone has that exact conflict. Okay. So I'm just using an example. The types of conflicts that exist are probably innumerable. They're just infinite at the very least. There's many, many different kinds. But this is a more common rooted mindset. So that's why I use it for an example. As a kid, those mindsets are necessary because when you are in an abusive situation or with an abuser, you need to be over here believing the world is unsafe so that you can try to protect yourself. It puts you on high alert. It puts you in a fear state, which will either make you couple different reactions to that, either overly submissive. So I'm just going to do everything I'm told as soon as I'm told. It can make you be super resistant. The world is unsafe, so I'm going to stay away from everybody and everything. It can make you fawn. So we have the free flight, fight, freeze, and then fawn is one that is sometimes added, which is just kind of the go numb. Like I don't feel anything, I don't do anything, I don't say anything. All of those responses in an abuse situation can actually be useful in minimizing the abuse. And so that mindset is important. But when the abuse is not happening, when you're at school, when you're with your friends, maybe with your family, in a non-abuse situation, it's helpful to have the mindset that everything's okay, especially if your situation is not going to provide a repair attempt. Then if you're just a mess and you're scared, it's going to be very hard to function as a kid. It's going to be hard to grow and to develop. And so you need both mindsets to survive. So the problem comes in, because we're actually not talking about kids today. I'm going to call those internal conflicts. Intolerable conflicts are the ones that create the splits. So even when you're whole, you're going to have internal conflicts. That's just part of life. An example, I like this person, but man, I just seem to get in trouble every time I'm with them. I spend too much money or I'm out too late and then I can't focus at work the next day, but I really enjoy being with them. So that's an internal conflict, right? It's not necessarily intolerable. It's not a survival level conflict. Even when you're whole, you're going to have internal conflicts. It's how we process the world around us. But what we're talking about are those conflicts that create a need for survival. So perfectionism is another one that comes in that category. And that is really about survival. And I don't use the word perfectionism often, but I'm using it here just because everyone kind of has a concept of what that means. But it's really just this sense of I'm not enough, or I need to be better. I need to be good enough. And often that comes from this need to earn safety. It's a safety issue versus I'm never adequate. I'm never going to be enough. And that's a shame-based problem. Perfectionism and shame are very much connected. And so you have this internal conflict as a kid where you're trying to control everything so that you can be safe, but yet you can't control anything. So that control conflict is likely at the root of that perfectionism versus I'm enough just the way I am. So you can kind of see how these internal conflicts develop. And I hope that you can see at least a little bit how they are essential for surviving trauma. You have to have different mindsets because you're in different situations and your brain is not developed enough to process it and to understand it. So you have to have different self states, different mindsets, different ways that you behave so that you can adapt in these separate situations until you're old enough and your brain is developed enough that you can work through it. So ideally, that happens in our 20s, right? That's when our brain is fully developed and we should be good to go processing these conflicts. Yeah, it's not that easy. And all of you that are not in your 20s anymore, you're like, oh, I wish. I'm very much a believer that God takes us on our journey in the time that we're able. And we really have to trust his timing and the way we work through things. And comparison is a detriment. Comparison is a detriment. And I'm going to give you a little side note on this too. This is what I don't have This is what happens when I don't have an outline. We do little bunny paths off, but I typically find that it's valuable for much of the audience, so I don't mind doing it. Comparison really can take you down a dangerous road, and it often leads to shame. I'd say that's probably the biggest end of the road of comparison. And I see it probably working with dissociation almost more than any other mental health issue. I see comparison. And I think that's because with dissociation, there's a sense of more an end, right? I got to work through to integrate. I have to work through to get to the end. And so anytime that we have that, it's almost like our brains take it as a measuring stick. Like, how many have you integrated, or how far along are you, or how much work have you done? And I should be that far. How are you able to function? I should be able to function. And there's just a lot of comparison that happens in that. And it just almost always leads to shame, because it feels like, oh man, I should be working harder. What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? Is God not helping me? There's just a lot of negative thoughts that can go into that. And so I just encourage you to stay on your path and to really believe God's got you, and timing is in his hands. Do the work. The work that you're doing to integrate and to heal will be beneficial to you when you're whole, because a lot of the same tools you use when you're whole, you just use them in a different way. And so soak up the healing journey as best you can and learn what you can. Okay, so we've got two separate conflicts. Well, by the time you get to adulthood, you're going to have more than two conflicts. You're going to have a good half dozen at least different conflicts that you're navigating internally. And that's why you have all of these different self states, because they each hold different conflicts. And again, I go through this process kind of in detail in my book, Trauma Coping System. And when I email at the end of all of our group sessions, kind of the summary, I'll have a list of all the resources there. So there's a lot more examples in the book, which can be helpful. So when you are working on healing, so remember our four, our self-awareness and self-responsiveness, we're going to start with those two, are really important, because when you're starting your healing journey, you don't know what the different conflicts are. And I would say most of the time on your healing journey, you don't know what all of the conflicts are. They kind of have to come up as they come. And because whatever mindset you are used to living in just feels true to you. It doesn't feel like it's a conflict. It doesn't feel like there's an opposite to this. Sometimes your self-awareness is strong enough that you can say, yeah, actually, I do feel very differently on this at different times. Faith is one that people can kind of come to a little bit more on their own, where I'll hear people say, some days, like, I love God, like everything in me loves God. I want to be with God. I want to serve him, and he's my best friend, and da da da. And other days, I don't even know who God is. Like, I don't even know if I'm a Christian. Some days I don't even have a concept of God. Like, he's not even in my head. I don't even wonder if I'm a Christian, because I don't even think about God. Completely different mindsets. You have to make some connections internally. You have to reconcile the different mindsets. And that's why the internal communication is important. That's why it's not helpful to just push the protector parts away, because I don't like that mindset. That mindset is not who I am. That mindset is not godly. That mindset is not helpful. Maybe that mindset is harmful. And so the tendency is to just want to push those mindsets, those protector parts away. Because if I can just live over here where I believe the world is safe, don't remember which side I did that on earlier, then I can be happy. And that's what I want. So I just need to push away the other mindset. It doesn't work. At best, you can bury it. At best, you can bury it. But when you bury it, you still feel it. It's still part of you, and it's using up your body. Like it takes energy from our brain, from our physical body to keep things stuffed, to keep something contained takes a lot of energy. And so you're going to be more tired. You're going to have some memory loss. You're going to have some fatigue. Your body's going to wear out sooner. Anytime that we are keeping things buried or stuffed in our hearts and our minds, it wears on us because God just didn't design us that way. We have to connect with those conflicts and we have to embrace them, not just become aware of them. That's important. But sometimes that awareness again makes us want to push away. We become aware and then we respond. How can I respond to this other mindset that I have? I don't like it. I don't want to believe that I have no worth. That's an icky, awful feeling. Don't want to believe that the world is unsafe. I don't want to feel that I'm not enough and that I'll never be enough. Those feelings and those thoughts are just terrible and awful feelings and thoughts. But when you are dissociative, they are part of your heart. And it is something that you needed, that belief you needed to get through trauma. And so when you're connecting internally, kind of owning it and saying, okay, I don't like that this is here, but it's here. And so I want to understand it. I want to learn about it. I want to know where it came from. I want Jesus to heal it. And making that connection with yourself is so, so important. Where a lot of the self-protective behaviors come in, like somebody mentioned shopping, somebody spending their paycheck, shopping, over shopping, drug or alcohol addiction, self-harm. Even we talked last time about the phone being an addiction, or a couple times ago, just scrolling, like completely zoning out and scrolling. And I don't just mean for 30, 40 minutes. I mean, an hour is kind of even normal in our society, but I mean, losing hours just kind of doing nothing on your phone. That is the self-protective behavior. And again, it feels like if I just push those parts away, like I know who's doing that. I've talked with them in session, or I hear them in my head during the week, or I feel their presence and they really want me to act out in this way or do this behavior. And it's wrecking my life, right? And so I just need it to stop. You can't just cut it off and you can't just squash it. You have to connect with it. It's there for a reason. And almost all of those connecting behaviors, or those unhealthy behaviors, are there to protect you in some way. Now, some of you who have a trauma coping system totally get that. Some of you don't. But this is where a lot of the helpers get stuck. Counselors and prayer ministers get stuck. Like the goal of many of these protector parts is just stop the pain. And it's not rational and it doesn't make sense. But remember, this developed when you were a kid. This developed before your brain was even fully developed. And so it's not always going to be rational or make sense. Those parts need your understanding. They need your connection. They need your strength. Very often when I work with people, the primary, the part that feels most like you, is kind of strong and is able to do things. And you just want to stay in that feeling of being strong. I totally get that. But that protector part needs your strength. That protector part, that sense of safety that you have when you're living in this mindset, that protector part needs to know that safety exists, that it's not just an illusion or a fantasy, or even worse, a trick. You connecting, being aware that that protection behavior is happening, whatever it is, responding to it. That's the responsiveness, right? I'm going to respond to it in a healthy way. I'm going to respond not with pushing away. That's what I want to do because I don't like it, but I'm not going to respond that way because I'm starting to understand this is how I survived. Crazy as that is, this is how I survived. So I'm going to respond in a way that is caring. I'm going to respond to this protector part with kindness. You might be surprised if you start responding to protector parts with kindness, the reaction that you get, because they need that. Oh, they need that kindness. And as you respond to them with kindness, that is going to help them heal in ways that you don't even know they need healing. So we respond to them with kindness, regardless of what behavior they're wanting to do or what profanities they're hurling at you in your mind and in your heart. Then we accept them just as they are. Now, these are not 1, 2, 3, 4. They don't always happen in order, and you bounce around. So you may, become aware, respond, accept. Oh, need more awareness. Okay, I'm accepting. Now I can respond. So these are not necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, but you need all 4 elements to heal. You accept them just as they are. I mentioned last time that one of the things that I'll often say when I'm working with protector parts is I have total respect for you, because I do. Like, I can't even imagine what they had to go through to try to figure out a way to survive when they're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, in unimaginable situations. And my respect for them is deep. My heart goes out to them just above all else, because it's hard. It's very, very hard. Now, some protector parts, you may tell them that, and their response will be, no, it's not. It's just my job. And that just tells me how hard they had to work at their job. They had to work so hard that they couldn't even receive kindness or empathy. And that just tells me they need it all the more. And so I'm soft, and I'm try to do it measured when I talk with them with what they can handle, because we can exceed our capacity on kindness too. So we don't want to do that. But to just be with them and to just accept them as they are, fierce and broken, right? Tough and wounded, both. That is their state. And especially when you're the survivor, you often don't see the broken and the wounded in the protector. You just see the fierce, and you see how hard they are making choices you don't want and you don't like. And you have to get to know them to get past that. It's hard work, and it takes patience, and it takes persistence. And I will tell you, in many ways, it is 100% not fair that you have to do that. You didn't cause your abuse. You did not cause your dissociation. You did not put yourself in this situation. Your trauma coping system kind of has a mind of its own, many minds of its own, right? And it's not fair, but it is reality. And we can get stuck in that conflict too, even as the primary. Your primary can get stuck with, oh, this is my reality, but I hate it. It's not fair. And it's like, you got to work to resolve that and just kind of come to a place of, you know what, this is what it is. That's something that even when you're whole, that's a conflict that's part of life. Things that are not fair, right? You lose your job, you can't pay your bills, you lose your house to no fault of your own. Not fair, but reality. And so working through, if you are stuck on that, well, this isn't fair and I don't like it, building up your skills to cope with that, to manage that, that's a life skill. That's one of those skills that translates into wholeness, so that you can work on wholeness too. Or when you're whole, you'll be able to resolve those type of conflicts. So as you're accepting them, we have awareness and we have responsiveness. We're responding with kindness. We're accepting them. Accepting does not mean approving. So let's distinguish there, okay? I fully accept the protector parts that I work with, but that doesn't mean I approve of how they're choosing to accept, or how they're choosing to protect. I fully accept them, but that doesn't mean that how they are choosing to protect, that I'm supporting it or I'm promoting it. To me, that's kind of a side issue. And I know it doesn't feel that way when you're the survivor. As you accept and respond to them in a positive way, their need to do those behaviors usually comes down. Maybe not all the way, but it reduces because it feels a little less dangerous to them when you're connecting with them, when you're acknowledging them. So here's let's see if I can use this example. I don't want to muddle our metaphors, so I'll hold it off. Maybe I'll add it in a little bit. It's in my book, but I don't want to muddle us. So when you are connecting with them, you're accepting them, and it's not I accept you, but you have to stop this behavior. If you jump to that, you're going to lose them because again, that feels like the only thing that's keeping them safe is that behavior, whatever it is. I accept you fully as you. You are me. You are part of me. I don't understand it, but you are, and I accept you. Now we're going to take some ownership for whatever this conflict is. Now, these steps that we're talking about rarely happen in one conversation. If you are well tuned to your system and you've done it a lot, it can happen in one conversation. But if you're just starting this new, it's going to take you a while. It may take you weeks, months. We'll leave it at that. It may take a long time. And that's where the patience kicks in. I had one client that did a testimony for us on one of the trainings that we did. And when I asked her what was most helpful for her in therapy, she said that it wasn't just empathy that I had for her protector parts. She called it the extra empathy dynamic. I'm like, those words just relayed what her feeling was about it. The extra empathy dynamic. And that was being able to just sit with the parts, regardless of what they're saying, what they're doing, just letting them get it all out. And that's what you need to do with yourself. It's way harder to do it with yourself, probably, than someone on the outside do it for you. And that's why finding a good counselor or someone that can walk you through this can be very helpful. Because when you are feeling that protector, you're not entirely separate from that protector. So it's like you're trying to connect with that protector's over here, but then all of a sudden you're over here and you're feeling that same anger and you're feeling those thoughts of self-protection. And it's like, but I want to stay over here so I can help them, but you're kind of connecting so much that you're merging a little bit internally. You guys are asking good questions, so I'm going to get to them as I can. It can be confusing then to try to maintain that sense of an anchor to what you believe, to what your mindset is when you start kind of connecting so much with that protector mindset. I hope that makes sense to everybody as I'm describing it. And so having someone on the outside that can do that for you can be really helpful. And as I mentioned before, I'm not taking clients, but I can connect you with some counselors that do this well. As you do that, and as they're able to soften and to lessen, even over time, you can step into this place of ownership. So ownership is how you resolve these initial conflicts. Okay. It's a super, super powerful place. The phrase that I will tell people, let me back up and say the two words that will switch you almost quicker than any two other words. You ready for these two words? Very simple. I can't. I can't. When you were a kid, that's kind of how the dissociation started. I can't do this. Like, I can't understand. I can't survive. I can't comprehend. I can't creates that. When you're in an overwhelming situation, now this is true whether you are dissociated or whether you're whole, we all hit our capacities at some point where it's just like, I can't anymore. That's normal human place to come to, right? But when you're dissociative, what I always say is if you can't, somebody else has to. So if you are functioning well and something happens and you hit your capacity and you're like, oh, I just can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. There's going to be another part that's going to say, I can, or I will, and they will jump right in and boom, you've switched. So if you're in a situation, let's say with a friend or a coworker or a family member, and they say something that triggers you, and you're in your primary, you're in yourself that feels most like you. Okay, so you're doing good, and they say something that triggers you. Maybe it's a trigger word, or maybe it's their tone, or they're describing a situation that they were in, and you were like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea you could respond to someone like that." Whatever it is, they trigger you, and in your primary self, you're like, I I just can't, like, I don't know how to have a relationship with this person right now. I can't be here. I can't talk to them. There's not really an exit. Boom. You got to protect your part that's like, I'll do it. I'll handle it for you. And that protector part switches. And then that's when you say things you didn't want to say. That's when you do things you didn't want to do. That's when you literally get up and run out of the room. I mean, the protector parts are going to do what you can't do. Often when I introduce those two words to people in session, they will say something like, oh yeah, I don't ever really say that. Like, that's not something I really ever think or say. And so I'll just leave it with, pay attention over the next week. Just pay attention to your thoughts. Let me know. And then we drop it, we move on. Almost always, they come back the next week. Oh my, I can't believe how many times I say I can't. Like, yeah, I know. It is just ingrained, and it may not be those exact words in your head, but that's the feeling and that's the sense. That's what's happening in your brain is this, and it switches you. So what I encourage you to do in that situation. So when you're talking to a protector part, that can happen too. When you're trying to do this internal communication and you're just like, I just can't with this part. I just can't. This is impossible. They're never going to change. Can't even tell you how many times I've heard that. They're never going to change. I just can't with them. You can, that can create a switch internally, even in your internal communication, and just kind of send your whole brain and your whole system spiraling. So some replacements to that, okay? Because the reality is sometimes we can't. That's the reality. And if we just try to say, yes, I can do all things through Christ, or I can power through this, or I've done harder things, I can. Maybe, but also maybe you're going to just slip into denial and switch to another part. Like, just trying to say the opposite to yourself is rarely helpful. All right. So what I encourage you to do, because remember, we're talking about mixing things. We're talking about connecting internally. So say something like, I can't do this on my own. So you see how you go from an impossible wall of I can't, period, to a little pathway. I can't do this on my own. So that means maybe I could do it if I wasn't on my own. You see how it just cracks the door just a little bit versus putting a wall up of this is it. I can't do this without Jesus. I can't do this without my counselor. Maybe it's a time frame thing. I can't do this today, but I can try again tomorrow. I can't do this right now because I'm at work, but I can try when I get home. So take your I can't. We don't want to just ditch it, all right? Because then we're actually going to stuff it, and that contributes to dissociation. But we want to add something on to the I can't, whatever your situation is. I can't, but I can't until, and adapt it to your situation, and just get used to doing that, because that is going to be helpful to you in keeping those switches from happening, especially if that's happening a lot for you and it feels out of control. So when you're working with the protector parts, You have to know that that's one of the things that will make them pop up and kind of take over, is when you're feeling or thinking, I just can't, period. That's going to make that switch happen. Internal conversations with those parts. So we're connecting with them. We're saying, I don't understand, but tell me more. Help me understand. Yeah, I know you don't like me. I kind of don't like you right now. Here's the thing with parts, all right? We can fake it and bluff a lot of people. You guys could all fake it and bluff with me. No worries, right? You can fake it and bluff it with a friend, with a coworker, with whomever. You cannot bluff your parts. They are internally. They are connected to you. They feel what you feel to a degree. They think what you think. And if you are telling them you like them when you don't, they are going to know it. They're just going to know it. And so you got to be honest. You got to be honest with them. And that honesty, even if it's not pretty, is going to buy you some credibility internally. Then if you're in that place where I don't like them and I don't want to be with them and I don't want to do all these things you're saying, then you need to work through that as your own self, as the primary. You've got to work on that issue. If you have a counselor, you can talk to your counselor. How do I get to where I can like myself better? Again, this is the same issue with wholeness. When you're whole, you're going to have things you don't like about yourself. Just reality. You got to be able to navigate that internally and figure out, how can I reconcile that I'm not the person I want to be all the time? How can I reconcile that I want to be better at something and I'm not? How can I reconcile that I really wanted that relationship to work and I blew it? This is a life skill. It's not just a dissociative skill. It is a life skill. Working on it when you're dissociative will help you when you're whole. The skill completely translates. So you're connecting with parts. You're working on your own heart towards the parts, right? And you are building relationship there. Help me understand. What do you need? I feel your anxiety. I feel you wanting to do these behaviors that I really don't think are good for us. What can we do instead? How can I help you? And really listen to them. And maybe their plan B doesn't feel that much better than their plan A. But if it's less harmful, that's a step in the right direction. So you take it and you think of this as steps versus I'm just going to leap to being better. It's a process and you have to kind of go slow in it. Then at some point recognizing, this is the ownership piece, that this is my problem. This is my problem. Like, no one wants to think that that's their problem, but it's your problem too. And to be able to say, I can't anymore, but I'm going to try. That's another one to put at the end of I can't, or I don't feel like I can, but I'm going to try. That's a good one to put in there too, because again, it's not that dead end wall. And you be persistent and you be patient and take breaks. There's sometimes when you're not going to be able to do this internal communication. It feels like, even maybe listening right now, I'm going to have to do this 24/7 if I'm ever going to get better. You can't. None of us can do anything 24/7. We're not wired that way. Take breaks, not just throughout the day, but maybe you take a week, a day, a weekend, and like, okay, everybody, we're not going to be trying to get along. Let's just relax this weekend. Let's veg out on some healthy TV programming. Let's go take a drive somewhere. Let's set a budget and shop on Amazon, but not exceed our budget. Let's do something that is engaging and that's relaxing and doesn't feel like hard work, because you've got to rest too. It's very, very important to rest too. One of the resources that I'm going to connect you with, when I email you guys the wrap up, is on our website, and you can go there on your own, but I'm not going to take the time to type it out. But if you go to our website and then just do /booklets, there are a few free PDF booklets there that you can download. And one of them is The Power of Rest. That's not the title. I don't remember the title, but it talks about pain and rest and those kind of being a cycle. And we have to rest. We can't just white knuckle it through when we're doing any kind of healing. We have to be able to rest. That's a whole nother class. So we're not going to talk about that today. That's why I'm sending you to the booklet. But work on that with the parts. One other thing with protector parts that I'm going to address, and then I'm going to pick up a couple questions that I've gotten before we wrap up today. And that's the trust issue. So trust, 5-letter word, trust. It's not a happy word for many, many trauma survivors. It can be a very triggering word. And with protector parts, often, again, we have this conflict, and the protector part may be saying, I can trust no one. There's no one that's safe. I can trust no one. And then you're saying, but we can set boundaries and we can choose who we trust. And some people we can and some people we can't. And they're like, nope, you can't trust anybody. Nobody's safe. So that's all or nothing. That's common with dissociation. That takes time. It just takes time. But let me tell you, your protector parts, as different as they may seem from you and as resistant as they may seem to you, they really are connected to you. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a protector part. And when it all comes down to it, the primary actually does believe the same that they do. And it's like, yeah, actually, they're right. I am hurt by everyone I come in contact with. Like, really, it does feel like nobody's safe. Ooh, ownership. I like it. We can work with ownership. You really have to be patient. You have to take breaks. You have to be patient and you have to be persistent and work on these skills, everything that we're talking about today. As I think I mentioned, it seems like all of my videos are working. Obviously, I haven't checked today's video yet, but the other 3 seem to come through okay. So I should be able to send you guys video links of all 4 weeks that we've done. You can review if you missed something. If you misunderstood something, listen again, because sometimes we hear it different when we hear it the second time. Someone had popped up in regards to this emotions. I had said, get it all out. We do need to get it all out can mean a couple different things. I'm not sure if I said it in regards to our beliefs or our emotions, so I'll address both. What we're thinking and what we're feeling. We need to be able to verbalize it, to put it out there. If you can't verbalize it, honestly, sometimes even drawing a picture will help you get it out. Whatever the conflict is or the belief or the feeling, being able to cry through something, being able to let yourself be angry until you start to feel the relief. It's super helpful, and it can even be tiny. I was in a session last night with someone and she was struggling with her contact lens. And she gives me permission to share everything. So this is fine for me to say here. And she was like, I think we were talking about internal communication. That's what we were talking about. Because they had tried it during the week and it kind of went awry. So I was giving them tips and trying to educate a little bit. She's trying to get her contact out. She's like, you can keep talking. I'm just going to get this out. So I'm like, okay. So I kind of get the first step and she gets her contact out. Her eye is just red because it's really irritated from her contact. And she was still engaged and listening and she wasn't triggered or switched. But I'm like, goodness gracious, when you're in pain, like it just seems rude to keep going with conversation. And so I was like, let me just give you a minute. Like, let's just let your eye relax now that the contact is out and the redness and just let it. I'm just going to give you a minute. There's no need to push through. That's what I told her. It's probably 3 seconds and she was in tears. And she's like, why does your kindness make me cry? She's like, I always push through, but your kindness is just making me cry. And so I was like, okay, well, this is where we're going now. And so we still didn't push through. We just let her cry. And it's like, sometimes we need that. We just need some kindness. And that lets our whole body like feel this relief. Like, what, I don't have to push through? That's crazy. And with that relief often comes tears. And so we just let her cry it out. And it's not a 100% I'm healed once I cry it out, right? But it's whatever that feeling is that you need to feel until you get to this place of kind of, okay, tired, a little bit of relief, not necessarily better, but a little bit of relief, worn, okay, I can rest a little bit right now. Like that's a good place. That's when you know you got it out, you got something out. Where we don't find that is often when we have to cut our emotions short and we end up just like, okay, I got to pull this back inside. I got to pull the tears in, pull the anger in, just get back to myself. Like that's stuffing and you didn't really get it out. You stuffed it back in. And so you're not going to experience that relief and that kind of tiredness at the end of it. That's what you're looking for often, not all the time, but often. So some of the questions that I have received are a little bit outside the scope of 4 weeks. And as most of you probably know on here, this is incredibly complex. So to talk about dissociation and treating yourself well in 4 hours, it's just not going to happen. And so I try to hone in, and we ended up kind of in internal communication, which I think is what the majority of you needed. Some of the other topics, SRA. So with SRA is where you get a lot of the double binds, which is what somebody asked about. You work through them in a very similar way. That I love to work on double binds and listening prayer because that kind of streamlines it a little bit. And again, that's just a generic term for being able to take something to the Lord and really listening to him and letting him work on your heart. But you work through double binds in a very similar way that you do with these conflicts. It's a whole nother process that's kind of outside of our time frame. So I'll leave it with that. Another question that I got a lot about had to do with kids and teenagers who are clearly dissociative. While every trauma coping system develops in childhood, in teen years, well, more in childhood years, but teen is possibly, it's a little controversial. The questions were about people who are still kids, still teens, and who are clearly dissociative. That process just looks different. And the system is the same, okay? God's principle and God's design for dissociation and trauma coping system, his design is the same for every single person. But as a kid, your brain is still developing. And so there's more avenues for just kind of a natural healing process with repairs, like I talked about at the beginning, than there is once you're an adult. But anything more than that I would say about working with kids and teens, I feel like is just going to create confusion and more questions. So I'm going to tell you that again is a whole nother topic. And I may even go back and delete a few of the things that I said from the video last week, just because I feel like it was just enough to create confusion, and I don't want to do that for people. There's a whole plan of healing for kids and teens who are dissociative. And I'm so grateful for the option to have repair attempts. That is a beautiful thing that God gave us. I'm so grateful that the brain is still developing. And so it doesn't have to lock into dissociation. The only other thing I'll say about that is you don't necessarily, with kids and teens, research says that it's less effective to break out their system. It's less effective to talk about this part and you're that part and this part, because that can actually reinforce the splitting rather than letting their brain and their repair attempts and the power of God heal. And so I don't necessarily recommend breaking down a system, especially for a child and even for a teen. That's kind of iffy because there's just a lot of natural healing that can happen. On that note, I want to give you guys some product information, and then I'm going to talk about next steps. We may go just a couple minutes over. If you do have to leave right at 11 o'clock Central Time, that's completely fine because all this will be in the video. All right. But I want to make sure and give you guys all of the follow-ups and the resources. So speaking of kids, Healing for Your Child, a prayer guide for parents and caregivers. I'm reading it backwards. Of a child impacted by trauma or abuse. This is my new book. and it comes out in, I think, 3 days, 2 days, 3 days. It'll be on Amazon. And it's just a 21-day prayer guide that's going to walk you through things to pray for your child. If you're a parent or a caregiver and your child has been in a traumatic or abusive situation, I recommend counseling along with it, because people that do play therapy or that know how to work with kids can really help those kids to kind of integrate and repair and resolve conflicts internally. What this book is meant to cover is a lot of the spiritual gaps that don't get addressed in children. So things like generational curses, things like ungodly relationship bonds, how to think about justice versus healing. Boy, I could talk on that one. Maybe I'll do a video on that one. Justice and healing are kind of two different things. And as a parent, we want justice and we want healing. We want it all. And it's like healing for sure. God has a design and plan for that. Healing is in the hands of God. Justice is often in the hands of man. The interesting thing to think about. How to process that, how to prioritize that internally. Internal conflicts with kids. So we addressed that a little bit in here. And so this is to just kind of fill some of those gaps that often happen when working with kids that have trauma. With that, and on the kids' notes, my colleague, Stephanie Hinman, has written this book, Building Bounce with Kids. Does not talk about trauma or dissociation, but it's a lot of good resiliency skills and things that will help you make repairs with your kids if your kids are working through trauma. Again, I'm going to send all these resources in the email, so you'll have links to them. But I would recommend both of these books if you're working with a kid or teenager that has trauma. Read both of those. Already mentioned my two books, Trauma Coping System and Trauma Coping System Devotional, which is specifically about dissociation and help you kind of walk through a lot of what we've talked about these 4 weeks has been in here with a lot more detail and examples. And then my devotional I have every week. I read it on YouTube. I think there's 31 days, so 31 videos. And so you don't even have to buy the book for that one, because I read the chapter and then talk a little bit about it. You can go through this process. And there's a lot of healing. This is probably my book that I've heard the most healing stories have come from the devotional, which is kind of fun. And then I'm working on a trilogy. I don't think I've mentioned it in our group yet. It's a fiction trilogy. But what I found is a lot of people wonder, where is God in this? And not just in the trauma, but where is he today? Like, I'm in pain today. I have problems today. Like, what is he even doing? One of my favorite questions to ask any group of people, I don't ask survivors very often. Mostly it's honestly caregivers, is how is God fighting for you right now? What's he doing right now to fight for you? Boy, that makes people think. You can say God's fighting for me, God's on my side, God's got my back, I trust him. But if I were to put you on that point and say, right now, what is he doing for you? Often people go blank, like, I don't know how to answer that one. And so survivors, caregivers, that's a common question. So how do I answer that question? I write fiction books. That's how I answer that question. This is a story about a woman named Cindy. She's completely fictional. She has DID with a history of SRA, and she is going through a healing journey. And in these books, you see her story, her journey, and then I parallel what's happening in the spiritual world. Not graphic. I don't have graphic abuse details on purpose. And even in the spiritual stuff, I'm less detailed. I'm not graphic in that way either, because I really want survivors to be able to read these books and not get triggered by them. One of the most common things I've heard from SRA survivors is, oh my gosh, she wrote my story. One lady I know that was DID SRA, she's healed and fully integrated now. She's been going through the books with her husband, and she says every page, like almost every page, I can relate to from my personal story. And as I'm reading it with my husband, he's understanding me and what I went through better. And so it's a way that they're actually connecting post-integration deeper in their relationship. And then another lady who is a therapist that works with DID SRA. She read it. She's been giving it to all of her clients, and her clients are like, oh my gosh, this is me. Like, this is exactly what's happening. And so if you want that validation for your story, or if you're thinking, hey, I don't know where God is right now. Like, is God even fighting for me? One of the scenes in one, I don't know if it's book 1 or 2, Cindy is just like praying in that moment, God, maybe just send an angel, just one angel that just could be with me to keep me today. And as she's saying that, the troop of like half a dozen angels that are on assignment to her 24/7 are like, wow, she only knew. Like, she has no idea what we're doing up here. Concept. It's good to have a context for what God does for us. And it doesn't mean that everything in the book is exactly what happens, but my goal is to open up your heart and your mind to realize, okay, maybe there's more going on than what I know. Maybe God is working a plan for me that I'm not even aware of. So both of those books are available. The inevitable question, when will the third book be out? Can I just end right here? I don't know when the third book is going to be out. It will be out eventually. Yeah, that's all. That's the best I can tell you. This is number 1, More Than Meets the Eye. And then War Strategy is number 2. It's important to read them in order. And then the third book, entitled Wholeness. Truthfully, I'm shooting for 2025, but we'll see what happens. I mean, it won't be sooner. I'm going to tell you that for sure. But hopefully it'll be 2025. Okay. I think we've covered it. You guys are awesome. I am just so blessed and thrilled with the number of you that have joined our group. Oh, the one other thing, I knew there was something else, next steps. So I've got a couple of other opportunities for you. One is I'm starting on my YouTube channel. I'm going to try it 1, 2, maybe 3 times and just see how it works. Thank you guys. I'm going to do live Q&A. So that will be for anyone who hops on my YouTube channel, can be a part of the live Q&A. Like I said, I'm just going to do it once or twice and see how it goes. But the first time will be coming up this next Tuesday at 6 o'clock Central Time. So if you hop on at 6 o'clock Central Time, and I'll put my YouTube channel in the email that I send you guys if you're not already on there, you can hop on the live Q&A. It's a little bit rusty to run because I don't have the number of subscribers needed to make it great, because YouTube does everything in milestones. So you can subscribe and help me out with that, but I'll still be able to do some Q&A through that. We'll do a short trauma training at the beginning, and then I will answer questions on trauma or dissociation. Probably still won't go into the kid questions on there if you're like, oh, a second chance to get at this, because that's just really a whole nother topic. But certainly adult trauma and dissociation we'll be able to answer questions on. And then keep an eye on our website, because we have lots of different opportunities coming up. There is a webinar that I'm speaking at in November with Deeper Walk International, and there's 3 speakers, and we're all going to be talking about trauma and healing from trauma. And I think that will be really valuable. I'll list that in the resources as well. And then I hope next year to kind of run this again. I was thinking today, thank you guys so much. I appreciate all your feedback you're popping up here. I was thinking actually this morning, as I was thinking about this group, that I might do, I don't know if I would do a 4-week series or just a morning, 1 or 2 hours in the morning, but I might do one just on integration and just talking about what that looks like, because a lot of people, that's something vague out there and it feels far, and it is far for some people, but just what it looks like, why it's important. Not everybody wants to integrate, which is completely fine, but just to put that information out there. So if I do that, you guys are officially on our training list now. So you'll get the email to let you know that that's happening. So I think that's all. Okay. Several people are saying they're interested in that. So good. All right. Let me pray and I will send you guys on your way. All right. Father, thank you so much for each person in attendance, for each survivor and caregiver and just person. We're all your children. All of us are your children, Father. For anyone who has not accepted you as Lord and Savior, I do ask, Father, that you would just teach them about who you are and build that relationship. And then for those here who are part of your kingdom, who have accepted you into their lives, I just ask that you would make yourself known in new ways to them, in safe ways, because I know that can be scary for some parts, but just in whatever way is needed and appropriate and helpful for each and every person. We thank you for healing, Father. I know that's your heart. You gave us trauma coping systems, and that's amazing. Your design is amazing, but your design for healing is also amazing. And so I ask that you would just show each and every person here new ways that you are in our life, new ways that we're not aware of, that you would teach us new things. And I thank you, Father, for just continued healing. I ask that you would prohibit all retaliation of the enemy for the time that we've spent together, that you would destroy any backup plans, cancel any assignments or harassments against any of us, our family, our property, or personal domain. And just thank you, Father, for your continued grace and mercy. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. I appreciate the comments and just the feedback. And I hope you guys have a really blessed week. I look forward to seeing you next time we do something. Maybe on the Q&A. We'll see.